Hey folks, Bobo here. Welcome back to Threes In. We're still in the middle of the basic two-ship formation phase. I want to tie up a couple loose ends here. As I reviewed the last video, I mentioned that we were departing on a formation check. We're not that far ahead to get a check right, so disregard the stupid, okay? It was just a formation ride. To give you a sense of the training flow here, I just took a look at my flight records, and I soloed after 10 hours of dual instruction. And I suppose that's about the norm, about 10 hours of flying. And like I said, we would log about 1.5, 1.4. I saw a couple 1.2s. They must have spent a little bit more time in the extended trail. But 10 hours is probably a ballpark figure for soloing in two-ship. A couple other things that happens out in the area that I didn't mention in the earlier video here. Lost wingman. That's just such a joy. And that can happen almost any time that you're separated. More often it happens in pitch outs and rejoins when you pitch out for a mile spacing. And if you drag a wingman through the sun, good chance that he's going to lose you. So you want to be cognizant of where the sun was during your maneuvering, lest you lose your wingman. Now, if you did lose your wingman, man, it happened. It's not a big deal. Getting back together was the big deal. So first thing you want to do is ensure you had vertical separation, and that's the lead responsibility. So it'd be like Reno 17 lead is level 17,000. And I like to put the wingman about 1,000 feet minimum below me. You take 16,000, roger. Okay. That way, if we end up in the same airspace at the same time, at least we're not at the same altitude. Okay, good. And then you kind of give them some idea of reference. You could use radial and DME if you wanted. I like to use a ground reference. One that taught the kids something really fundamental to flying. Look out the window. So I'd pick a ground reference and say, okay, we're over this feature here or that feature there, and I'm a right-hand turn 17,000. You maintain 300 knots, something that's familiar. And it took a little bit of time sometimes to get back together. The T-38 has such a very small profile when you look at it like this. And so it was really hard to see, either from the tail or from the nose. So it was a challenge. But one thing you could do, that I could do, was to give them a wing flash like that and put my belly up to them. And that brings up another issue. The white versus the camouflage airplanes. I suppose I'm partial. I just love the white. I think it's a regal paint job. I was not a fan of the camouflage T-38. It's a training aircraft. We use it for training. Finding the damn thing painted white was hard enough. Now you're going to camouflage it. Swell. At least you look shit hot while you're sitting there looking for each other. About the only thing I could think of. I just can't. But anyway, I don't want to get off track here. So we would spend a little bit of time getting back together, keeping in mind the time we spent lost wingman was time that we could be doing training and so forth. So we tried to get back together pretty quick. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about tactical maneuvering in another video of its own. I got a few things I want to say, and I don't want to drag this out too long. But the maneuvering I mentioned, the maneuvers we did, close trail, I lent some thought to that. About the only thing we did, I might have mentioned over the tops, but upon further review, I think we did a barrel roll in it, and we did lazy eights. But I don't think we did like loops or Cuban eights or anything like that. But we would do some pretty aggressive barrel rolls and lazy eights. And that was just to build, it was a confidence builder and so forth like that. The last thing I want to mention here is on recovery, especially in the dual, well, of course in the dual phase, as we came up initial to pitch out to land, I always had the IPs take the airplane. And I told the students, until you can demonstrate proficiency in fingertip, I'm going to have the IPs fly the airplane. Because everybody watches a 2-ship or a 4-ship or a 3-ship on initial. And we want to look good. And until you get proficient, we'll just have the IPs fly. It's not a big deal. Well, yeah, it's a big deal. Sure it is. Because that day, as you're coming up initial, the student's already been trained. It's kind of like Pavlov's dog. You get to 4 miles and he says, "Sir, you ready for the aircraft?" And the IPs say, "Roger," and take the aircraft. But that day that the students say, "Okay, sir, you ready for the aircraft?" And you say, "No, Jim, why don't you go ahead and fly today?" Man, you can just see them perk up. And that was so much fun. I used to wait for that day to come. Yeah, usually about 2 rides, maybe 3 rides before their solo. But I say, "No, Jim, why don't you take it up initial today?" Man, did they were. And then they carried that through the landing phase and then the ride in, because they achieved that. It's a little milestone, but it still instilled a lot of pride in them. You could see their chest puff up, and it was just a lot of fun to do. So I think that's about all I wanted to mention about some maneuvers out in the area to tie that area up and tell you about how we handled the fingertip on initial. So with that, this is Bobo, Base Gear Stop.